If one person wants to understand modern East Asia, China's nationalism, Japan's militarism, the Taiwan Islands' political identity, Korea's historical trauma, and even today's rivalry between the US and China, he cannot skip the First Sino-Japanese War, which only lasted about 7 months, with a death toll relatively smaller compared to later wars. Why is that war so important in the history? Hi everyone, welcome back to Difference Frames the World, a channel to see the world from a different perspective. Today, we talk about the First Sino-Japanese War, which opened a new chapter in East Asia's history, as it ended China's position as the unquestioned center of East Asia, announced Japan's arrival as a modern imperial power, set Korea on a path toward colonization, and turned Taiwan into a geopolitical bonus for the first time. The short war also triggered reform, revolution, and resentment that still echoes today. In many ways, the chaos from 1894 to 1895 is where the modern East Asian order was born, violently, abruptly, and humiliatingly. China slid further into the century of humiliation. By the late 19th century, the Qing dynasty of China ruled a vast empire, more than twice the size of the Ming dynasties, but the country was rotting from the inside. China had already suffered a lot before the First Sino-Japanese War. 2 opium wars in the 1840s and 1860s. The Taiping Rebellion killed dozens of millions, one of the deadliest civil wars in human history, if not the largest. Repeated humiliations by imperialist nations from the West, even tiny countries in Europe, forced the China to sign unequal treaties. Those unequal treaties had carved China into semi-colonial spheres of influence. Still, in the Chinese worldview, there was one comforting assumption left. Japan was culturally inferior and militarily small, so China remained number one in East Asia. For centuries, Japan had borrowed the Chinese writing system, Confucian philosophy, bureaucratic models and legal codes from China, so in traditional thinking, Japan was a student, not a rival. The declining Qing dynasty still looked down on Japan. That assumption would prove catastrophic shortly. Japan's story was completely different. In 1853, American warships forced Japan to open its ports. The shock was existential, and Japan's response was radical. It wanted to overthrow the Tokugawa shogunate, restore imperial authority, and adopt Western military, industrial, legal, and educational systems. Japan made those happen at breakneck speed. Japanese elites reached a terrifying conclusion: modernize their country, or let Japan be colonized. And once Japan modernized, a second idea followed naturally. If imperialism is inevitable, Japan should do it before someone does it to Japan. Korea, long a tributary state of China, became the obvious target. 300 years after the Imjin War, Japan started another invasion of Korea. Korea was and still is the spark nobody could ignore in East Asia. It sat at the center of East Asia's fault lines. China saw it as part of its traditional sphere, Japan took it as a strategic necessity, or a springboard to enter China, and Russia eyed it as a warm water outlet to access the vast ocean. In 1894, a peasant uprising in Korea forced the Korean court to seek China's help. China sent troops. Japan responded by sending more troops, claiming the right to intervene. Neither side backed down. The war started. Because of Korea, again. It was a war China was not ready for. On paper, China had more soldiers, more ships, and a larger economy. In reality, it had corruption, outdated training, poor coordination among regional armies, and officers promoted by loyalty rather than competence. Japan, meanwhile, had a centralized command, modern rifles and artillery, Western-trained officers, high morale, and national unity. The results were devastatingly one-sided. Japanese forces crushed Chinese troops first on Korea's soil, then crossed into Manchuria, advancing with shocking speed. The most dramatic part of the war took place on waters. Although the Qing dynasty's Beiyang fleet was once Asia's strongest, it was not as potent as it seemed. It was doomed because of poor maintenance, outdated tactics, and corruption. Japan's navy destroyed China's prestige at sea. By early 1895, the outcome was obvious. China sued for peace. Once a teacher of Japan for over 1,000 years, it dismissed the class and promised to surprise the student with awards, one of which was Taiwan. China and Japan signed the Treaty of Shimonoseki, which is still a national trauma for Chinese people across the world. In April 1895, Li Hongzhang signed the Unequal Treaty with Japan on behalf of the Qing dynasty of China. China recognized Korea as fully independent, ending centuries of tributary system. It ceded Taiwan and the Pescadores Islands, today's Penghu Islands, to Japan. It paid a massive indemnity to Japan, which fueled the Japanese militarism and accelerated its invasion of Korea, making it a Japanese colony, and later China's Manchuria. With the massive indemnity collected from the Qing dynasty, Japan further strengthened its military and defeated Russia on China's soil 10 years after the First Sino-Japanese War. China also opened more treaty ports. For China, this treaty joined a growing list of humiliations. For Japan, it was proof. We have landed on the land, not an island state anymore. Taiwan changed dramatically after the war, from imperial periphery to geopolitical core. Before 1895, Taiwan had been a frontier province of the Qing dynasty, strategically important, but underdeveloped and often neglected by the Qing court. Ironically, China did not upgrade Taiwan to a full province until 1887, just 8 years before losing it to Japan. It had been part of Fujian province, after which China's latest aircraft carrier was named. From 1895 to 1945, Japan turned Taiwan into its first overseas colony, a model for colonial administration. It built railways, ports, and infrastructure on the island, and modernized its agriculture, imposed strict political control, and suppressed resistance brutally. Taiwan's anti-Japanese activists never ended their struggle with the colonists from Tokyo. This period left a complex legacy in Taiwan: economic development alongside repression, cultural Japanization, and a distinct Taiwanese identity separate from the Chinese mainland. It matters immensely today. Modern Taiwan's political identity, especially its distance from the PRC, is inseparable from this colonial experience. The war shattered Chinese illusions. If Japan, once a student of China, could defeat the Qing troops so completely, something must be deeply wrong. The defeat furthered the self-strengthening movement and triggered the 100 Days Reform in 1898, which called for a constitutional monarchy, education reform, and industrialization. China's most famous school, Peking University, was established at that time. The lesson many Chinese took away from the defeat was bleak. The Qing system itself was the problem. This thinking directly led to revolutionary movements, and Sun Yat-sen emerged as a savior of China. The 1911 revolution ended imperial rule entirely. For the first time in over 2,000 years, China did not have an emperor. It went republic. In that sense, 1895 planted the seeds of the Republic of China, and later the People's Republic of China. Everything has two sides, and the First Sino-Japanese War has a sunny side as well. Japan's takeaway from the war was confidence, hubris, and militarism. It became a nightmare for Asian countries in the next 50 years. For Japan, the war was intoxicating. It confirmed that Western-style modernization worked, and that Japan should become a westernized imperialist country. It also learned that military power brings respect, and that might is right. It also became confident that the great empire of Japan was achievable. The indemnity from China financed Japan's heavy industry and warship construction, thereby further fueling Japan's military expansion. Psychologically, something dangerous happened: victory became proof of national destiny. This mindset pushed Japan toward the Russo-Japanese War in 1904 and 1905, the colonization of Korea in 1910, its expansion into Manchuria in 1931, the full invasion of China in 1937, and ultimately the Pacific War with the United States in 1941. In hindsight, the First Sino-Japanese War was Japan's first taste of imperial success, and its first step toward catastrophe. In the 1950s, 100 years after American warships opened Japan's doors to the West, and American General MacArthur became the king above the King of Japan, and wrote an institution for the country, castrating it as an American eunuch, economically, politically, militarily, and psychologically. The First Sino-Japanese War was also a tragedy for the Japanese people, leading Japan to the abyss of imperialism and militarism. Also, it awakened China and eventually propelled it forward, making it one of the most successful countries in human history. For the Korean people, China's recognition of their independence was seen as positive at the first glance, but in reality, it removed Korea's last shield. Within 15 years after the war, Japan dominated Korean politics and formally annexed it in 1910. For Koreans, the First Sino-Japanese War marks the beginning of modern national trauma. To this day, Korean historical memory of Japan begins not with World War II, but with 1894. The war brought forth the collapse of the Sinocentric order. For over 1,000 years, East Asia revolved around China till the Japanese defeated the Qing troops in 1894. After 1895, China was no longer the unquestioned center, and Japan became a regional power. Western imperialism accelerated the Qing dynasty's collapse, and the old Confucian diplomatic system came to an end. It wasn't just a military defeat. It was a civilizational turning point. This war still haunts Japan's relations with China. From China's perspective, the war symbolizes humiliation, and Japan's rise came at China's expense. For the Chinese, Taiwan's loss still resonates deeply, especially when Japanese leaders say Taiwan's contingency is Japan's existential threat. From Japan's perspective, the war is often underemphasized, frequently framed as a modernization success, with less emotional weight than World War II. This memory mismatch fuels mutual suspicion, nationalist narratives, and diplomatic tensions between the two nations. The war also affected Taiwan's political identity. The island's political status cannot be understood without this war. Taiwan was separated from China before the PRC existed, so anti-China elements questioned Beijing's claim over Taiwan. It developed under Japanese rule for 50 years, and many Taiwanese have close ties with Japan, and some of the Taiwanese are even descendants of the Japanese occupants. The island later became the refuge of the Republic of China after 1949, and a dozen small nations, deeply hidden in the vast Pacific Ocean and some distant corners, still recognize the Republic of China as the legal representative of 1.4 billion people. In some people's eyes, the Republic of China did not die in 1949, it is still alive in Taiwan. This historical layering gives Taiwan a unique identity, a different political trajectory, and strong resistance to forced unification with the Chinese mainland. Beijing's claim over Taiwan often starts with historical unity, but the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894 and 1895 complicates that narrative profoundly. Today, East Asia is tense due to the US-China rivalry, Taiwan's Strait tensions, Japan's military normalization, and Korea's security dilemmas. Many of these dynamics trace back to the end of Qing dominance, Japan's emergence as a power, and the unresolved legacy of empire. The lesson from the First Sino-Japanese War is multifaceted. Rapid change without mutual understanding breeds prolonged memory and protracted resentment. China learned to fear weakness. Japan learned to trust power. Korea learned the cost of being caught in between, and the importance of a strong China as its shield. Those lessons still shape policy, identity, and fear today. The First Sino-Japanese War doesn't get blockbuster movies. It doesn't dominate textbooks outside East Asia. But it quietly rewrote history. It ended one world and began another. And if we want to understand why East Asia feels so tense, emotional, and historically heavy today, 1894 is where we should start. Thanks for watching episode 5 of the series, China and Japan at War. Please watch other episodes as well by following the links in the pinned comments to get a clearer picture of why Japan and China are constantly at odds. Please also subscribe to our channel, so you will not miss the 6th episode of the series in the coming days.